In the heart of Africa lies Kenya, a nation once brimming with hope, now grappling with despair. It's a story of promises made, trust broken, and the unyielding spirit of its people. Its people, yearning for change, rallied behind a man they believed could deliver it, William Ruto. In his campaign, William Ruto promised transformation through affordable education, jobs creation for the youth, universal healthcare, and bringing down cost of living. His rise to power was meteoric, propelled by a strong alliance with the church and his vehement opposition to the outgoing president's harsh regime, which had formed a grand coalition government with the opposition leader and was backing his presidential quest. Nevertheless, William Ruto swept the election with a landslide victory, hailed as the people's president. But soon, the dream turned into a nightmare. As the nation waited for change, Ruto's government faltered. Instead of relief, the people of Kenya faced skyrocketing taxes, rampant corruption, and a leader out of touch with their pain. Cabinet members, for example, have been linked to embezzlement scandals involving public funds earmarked for projects and infrastructure development. They utilized the money to support their opulent lifestyles, which they flaunted on social media, notably purchasing expensive watches and luxurious vehicles at the expense of the nation's struggling economy and citizens. The nation spiraled into crisis. The tipping point came with the introduction of the Finance Bill 2024, a draconian measure to raise taxes on an already struggling population. However, the government justified the increased taxation as necessary to pay off government debt. Outraged, the people started protesting, led by the fearless youth under the banner of Gen Z, who used social media platforms, mainly X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok to mobilize and create awareness against the Finance Bill 2024 and other excesses under the hashtag #RejectFinanceBill. The protest quickly gained traction both online and physically across the country. The streets of Kenya became battlegrounds as the youth stood firm against oppression. Shortly, citizens from all walks of life expressed their displeasure at the punitive taxes suggested by the bill, despite the fact that the government fails to be held accountable for widespread corruption and wastage. Gen Z has since metamorphosed into Gen Z, all generations, to refer to a mindset that is, all citizens committed to good governance, the rule of law, inclusivity, and moral rectitude in public life, regardless of age. From cities to villages, Kenya's citizens rallied for change. Following this massive anti-tax protest, he earned a new nickname, Zakayo, Swahili, after the biblical figure of Zacchaeus, the wealthy and hated tax collector from Jericho. Ruto's response was swift and brutal. Protesters were labeled criminals and coup plotter. Despite being sworn to protect, the police became tools of tyranny under the direction of the Cabinet Secretary for Interior Security. Nevertheless, Article 37 of the nation's constitution upholds the inviolable right to protest. Furthermore, the Bill of Rights guarantees essential freedoms like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of conscience, all of which are necessary for an effective democracy. Internationally, the freedom to protest is affirmed by binding treaties and norms to which the country has signed. Since protests are allowed by the Constitution, they become significant when the government defies citizen demands and operates in a rogue manner. Despite spirited opposition, the bill went through the first and second reading and was eventually passed while protests were raging outside Parliament. So enraged were the protesters that they stormed the Parliament buildings and forced the MPs to run for safety. The protesters stormed Parliament, taking the symbolic mace, the power of the House, now claimed by the people. In Kenya's constitution, by taking the mace away, the protesters essentially declared that the parliament is not functioning legitimately in its current state. Many young people were shot dead by parliament security forces and rooftop snipers during the incident. It was a violation of protest as a direct democratic means by which the people exercise their sovereignty without the help of corrupt and ineffectual representatives. Realizing his grip on power was slipping, President Ruto backtracked, declining to assent the finance bill. He initially sent it back to Parliament for amendments, but finally threw it out entirely following ongoing public criticism. But for many, it was too little, too late. With the slogan #Ruto must go, protesters started calling for his resignation. In a press conference after the Parliament's storming, the President supported police officers who were accused of misconduct and labelled the young people who were protesting treasonous criminals. He disputed that police had extrajudicially shot protesters, injured others, and abducted many more, although armed people wearing balaclavas had nevertheless abducted young people and other civilians during the course of the protest. Furthermore, the president deployed military to the capital streets and across the country, presumably to restore peace and order by intimidating protesters. A few days later, the deputy president held a press conference in which he condemned the director of the National Intelligence Service, NIS, for failing to warn the president of the severity of the incident in advance, allowing them to respond accordingly. He demanded that the NIS director quit in order for a competent replacement to be appointed. The political elite in particular took his remarks seriously. The president dismissed the cabinet in the wake of the protests, but subsequently reappointed some of the cabinet secretaries back and absorbed others in the bureaucracy. 4 months later, political intrigue deepened as the deputy president, seen as a champion of the people, was ousted in a controversial and hurried impeachment. Members of the National Assembly decided to impeach the deputy president, alleging corruption, insubordination, and ethnically divisive politics. The Senate took up the matter and decided to impeach him as well. The function was overseen by both the ruling and opposition parties, who had formed a political alliance known as the broad-based government. The deputy president's impeachment was widely viewed as baseless, with accusations lacking evidence. Seeking justice, he moved to the High Court, which temporarily allowed him to retain his position through a conservatory order. This delayed the swearing-in of his replacement, appointed immediately after his impeachment. However, the High Court soon lifted the order, citing the constitutional requirement to promptly fill the deputy president's office. The new deputy president, who was previously assigned Cabinet Secretary of Interior and Internal Security, was officially sworn in the next day, which was designated as a national holiday. This move appeared politically motivated to prevent the impeached deputy president from challenging the process in court. The nation watched as justice was manipulated in the corridors of power. In the wake of a new government taking office, the nation faced severe crises, particularly in the health and education sectors, leaving many citizens to bear the brunt of these challenges. The abrupt shift from the long-standing National Health Insurance Fund to the newly introduced Social Health Insurance Fund (SHIF) led to widespread injustices, especially for patients unable to afford alternative means like private medical insurance. This, coupled with strikes by underpaid medical interns and health workers, and the lack of adequate medical equipment, resulted in devastating consequences, including preventable deaths. Similarly, the education sector underwent a turbulent transition. The government's shift from higher education sponsorship to a new university fee model, which required students to pay based on classification, excluded many bright students due to misplacement or their inability to meet the financial demands. Strikes by underpaid teachers and lecturers, alongside the scarcity of essential teaching resources in public institutions, further worsened the situation. Amid these crises, the president repeatedly assured citizens of impending improvements through new implementations. However, these promises remained largely unfulfilled, leaving the nation in a state of uncertainty and frustration. As public discontent in Kenya grew, the Catholic Church of Kenya, through its bishops, took a bold stand against the government. They accused the administration of excessive taxation, human rights violations, stifling free speech, poor policies across health, education, and security sectors, rampant corruption, and a culture of deception. The Catholic Church, wielding significant influence due to its vast investments in education, healthcare, and social programs, criticized the chaotic rollout of a new social health insurance scheme, where the government owed faith-based hospitals millions of money. The bishop's statement sparked a fierce backlash from government insiders, who accused the church of spreading misinformation. Despite the pushback, the Anglican Church of Kenya (AC) and other religious groups, including the Council of Imams and Preachers, joined the Catholic Church in condemning the government's failures, citing escalating impunity and rights violations. In a symbolic move, Catholic bishops rejected a $40,000 donation from the president, emphasizing their commitment to ethical independence. Political analysts warned that the president, known for using scripture to counter criticism, risked alienating religious institutions that could significantly influence his re-election prospects. Already facing rebellion in his political strongholds and criticism over his handling of anti-tax protests, the president softened his tone, acknowledging the clergy's concerns and pledging further engagement. Compounding his challenges, the president cancelled 2 major deals with Indian billionaire Gautam Adani after US prosecutors indicted the tycoon for fraud. The deals, involving a $1.85 billion airport project and a $736 million power line contract, were highly unpopular, sparking airport worker strikes and fears of corruption. Despite the energy minister's defense of the contracts, the cancellations marked an attempt to address growing corruption allegations against the administration. Caught between rising public frustration, religious criticism, and political turbulence, the president now faces the daunting task of mending strained relations and restoring public trust. The very churches that once helped him ascend to power may now play a role in shaping his political future. In the face of tyranny, a new Kenya was emerging. The youth united across tribes, faiths, and generations. They demanded accountability, equality, and a future where leadership served the people, not the other way around. Again, the voice of the church rang louder. Their moral authority reignited hope among the people, calling for justice and inspiring unity against tyranny. The story of Kenya is not over. The seeds of change have been planted, watered by the sacrifices of a united people. President Ruto's reign may have begun with promises, but the future of Kenya lies in the hands of its citizens, a generation determined to reclaim their nation and reimagine its destiny. For when the people rise, no tyranny can stand.